Good day, Miss. We're here to present the Paco Larrañaga case. The purpose of this presentation is to provide a critical analysis of the Paco Larrañaga, also known as the Chong Sisters case, by examining its facts, arguments, and legal issues. The presentation will apply the Tolman model of argumentation, behaviorism, and reasoning concepts such as fallacies and biases to better understand the different perspectives surrounding the case and the issue related to the justice and due process. Next slide, please. Um, Case study review. On July 16, 1997, sisters Mary Joy and Jacqueline Chong disappeared in Cebu City. The prosecutor claimed that Paco Larrañaga and six other men abducted, raped, and killed the sisters. Mary Joy's body was reportedly found in the ravine, while Jacqueline has never been found. Paco denied the accusation and presented an alibi supported by numerous witnesses, school's records, and attendance documents showing he was in Manila during the during the crime. Despite this, the trial court convicted all seven accused, and the Supreme Court later upheld the conviction. After the death penalty was abolished in 2006, Paco's sentence was changed to life imprisonment. Um, and and in 2009, he was transferred to Spain to continue serving his sentence. The case remains one of the most debated criminal cases in the Philippines. History because of continuing questions about the evidence, witness credibility, and fairness of the trial. The main issue is the case focuses on whether Francisco Paco Larrañaga and his co-accused were fairly convicted of the kidnapping, um, rape, and murder of the Chong sisters. It also raises questions about the fairness of the Philippine justice system, the reliability of witness testimony, media influence, and possible judicial bias. For the third slide, the author's main position of the argument, the case study argues that the conviction of Paco Larrañaga remains highly controversial because there were serious concern about the due process, conflicting evidence, alleged judicial bias, and heavy reliance on the testimony of a state witness. At the same time, it recognized that the Chong famous family continues to believe justice was served and that the court found the accused guilty beyond reasonable.
The author's Tolman method. Claim. The author argues that the accused committed the murder based on the available evidence. Grounds or evidence. The author presents eyewitnesses' testimony, CCTV footage, forensic evidence such as fingerprints or DNA, the murder weapon, and the suspect's actions before and after the crime. Warrant. When multiple pieces of credible evidence consistently point to the same suspect, it is reasonable to conclude that the suspect committed the crime. This follows the principle that reliable physical and testimonial evidence can establish guilt. Backing. Forensic science supports the reliability of DNA and fingerprint evidence in criminal investigations. Legal standards also require that the evidence be sufficient to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Qualifier. The accused is very likely guilty if the evidence is authentic, reliable, and has been properly collected and analyzed. Rebuttal. The evidence could be challenged if there was contamination of forensic samples, mistaken eyewitnesses, identification, an alibi supported by credible evidence, or procedural errors during the investigation. Our own Tolman method. Our stand. We agree with the author's conclusion that the accused is guilty. Our supporting argument. Different from the author's. We believe the accused attempts to hide evidence and provide inconsistent statements show an awareness of guilt, which strengthens the conclusions that the crime was intentional. Our evidence and references. People who deliberately conceal evidence or mislead investigators often demonstrate consciousness of guilt, which is considered relevant in criminal investigations.
In this part, we will analyze an argument about the Larrañaga case and Philippine justice system using the Tolman method. The Tolman method has 6 parts: the claim, the grounds, the warrant, the backing, the qualifier, and the rebuttal. First, the claim. The author argues the case shows major flaws in Philippine justice system. This results unfair trial and likely wrongful conviction. Next, the grounds or evidences. Solid proof supporting the claims. 35 witnesses and school records confirm Larrañaga was in Manila. The bias of judge denied venue transfer and reports of coercion. The weak case relying on one inconsistent witness. Defense evidence ignored by international court and human rights. Next, the warrant. Fair justice requires reliable evidence, respect for credible alibis, and no bias or coercion. This is the rule. This is the rule that connects facts to the conclusion of unfairness. Next slide, please. Next, the backing or references. 1987 Constitution, Article 3, Section 1 and 14 guarantees due process and impartial court. The Supreme Court rulings. State bias violates fair trial rules. Jurisprudence provides clear alibi deserves legal weight. Next, the qualifier. The claim is likely reportedly appeared through probabilistic, not 100% absolute, but it reflects strong findings but not totally certain. Lastly, the rebuttal. The claim is likely the rebuttal. The counterpoints and limits. Critics say trial was poor, alibi was fake, but this opposing view relies on emotion and narrative. It fails to answer the documented irregularities and strong alibi proof. To summarize, the Tolman method uses claim, grounds, warrant, backing, qualifier, and rebuttal. This make arguments clear, strong, and balanced.
So let's go here to the part 4 of our case study. So in this part, we're going to apply the behaviorism, and the first one is the turn the case law. So number 1, for the law of effect for this case study is the definition is people repeat actions that leads to good results and stop actions that lead to bad result. So the connection to this case is that the key witness David Balintie was promised he wouldn't go to jail. So this made him stick to his story in court. So number 2 is the law of exercise. So doing or hearing something again and again makes an idea stronger. So the connection to this case is the news repeatedly called Paco and his parents spoiled rich kid. Hearing this daily made people naturally assume that they were guilty. So pag palagi nilang naririnig sa balita or what, parang naiisip na nila, tumatak na sa isip nila na eto, dahil paulit-ulit guilty sila, so the plead na guilty, okay. Ganun. So third one is the law of readiness. So people learn or react faster when they already feeling prepared or emotional. So connection ha case na to is people were so upset about the crime that they were already eager to see someone punished. This made it easy for them to ignore Paco's proof that he was in Manila. So here naman is sa sobrang upset ng mga tao, so parang ano na sila ready na sila makitang parusahan, ganyan, ganto. Parang wala na sa isip nila na kapwa nila si Paco. So, yun. So, let's go to classical conditioning. So, yung US natin dito, what we call unconditioned stimulus is yung the news of the horrible crime. So, yung unconditioned response naman natin is yung natural feeling of shock or anger. So, yung nagulat and yung nagalit. So, yung CS naman natin is yung Paco's face and name. So, whenever na naririnig or nakikita nila yung mukha ni Paco, doon nagkakaroon ng response. So, yung response naman natin ulit, yung conditioned response is yung anger and assuming na guilty siya. So, whenever na nakikita ng tao or naririnig yung pangalan, iisip nila na guilty si Paco. So, paano nga ba to naging associate sa nangyari? So, yung the news constantly showed Paco face. So, yun yung CS. Alongside the details of the crime, US, eventually, just seeing Paco face, yung CS natin ulit, parang napaparamdam sa tao na galit, nararamdaman ng mga tao na galit sila and naisip nila na guilty si Paco. So, yun yung CR natin. So, yun yung conditioned response. So, ngayon, let's go to side effects of classical conditioning. So, number 1 is generalization. So, reacting the same way to similar things. Yun ang definition natin. So, paano nga ba natin ito mako-connect? So, people didn't just dislike Paco. They grew angry at all seven accused friends and wealthy youth in the area. So, pagkasama ka ni Paco, example, kaibigan ka ni Paco, kahit hindi ka guilty, basta kaibigan ka niya, tingin ng mga tao sa inyo, kasama ka na doon sa crime, guilty na kayo. Okay. So, sa discrimination naman, spotting the difference between two things. So, dalawang bagay. So, Spain and Human Rights Group could tell the difference between emotional news stories and solid proofs. Katulad nung kay Paco and doon sa mga flight records niya. Kitang-kita naman na magkaiba, di ba? So, sa third one is yung extinction. So, a learned reaction slowly fades away over time. So, years later, new documentaries focus on facts rather than scary headlines without the constant dramatic news. People's anger towards Paco faded. So, patagal ng patagal, kakaroon ng ibang documentary. So, nag-iiba na. Parang yung galit ng mga tao dati kay Paco, nawawala na, unti-unti. So, let's go to operant conditioning. So, number 1 is the reinforcement. So, positive reinforcement, giving the key witness freedom from jail to encourage him to keep testifying. So, parang binibigyan si Paco dito ng reward para mag-testify. Tuloy-tuloy na mag-testify. Yung witness. So, para mag-testify lang siya, ma-prove na guilty nga si Paco. So, sa negative reinforcement naman is yung suspect answered police question 2 so that the physical hurting during questioning would stop. So, para ma-ease yung pain, yung pangyayaring pagpaparusa or what, ang ginagawa ng ang ginagawa ng mga tao is yung witness, yung suspect rather, ina-answer niya kagad yung mga tanong ng police para ma-ease na yung pananakit, yung pagpaparusa. So, number 2 is yung punishment. So, positive punishment, the judge act very angry toward Paco's lawyer to make them stop objecting. So, para ma-plead na guilty at hindi na mapagtakpan pa yung ginawa ni Paco ng mga lawyers niya. So, yung mga judge, nagpakita ng emotion nila, nagalit sila or what. So, sa negative punishment naman, sending Paco to prison took away his normal life and freedom to penalize the crime. So, ang ginawa naman nila, kinulong nila si Paco dahil sa kasalanan niyang ginawa, sa crime niyang ginawa. And yun yung naging punishment niya. And yeah, that's all po para sa part na to. So let's go to the other part.
I will discuss some of the logical fallacies that can be identified in the arguments and statements surrounding the Paco Larrañaga case. First is ad misericordiam. The statement says, the Siong family has always maintained that justice was served. They continue to believe Paco and his co-accused were guilty, emphasizing their pain and loss. This can be considered an ad misericordiam if the family's suffering is used as proof that the accused were guilty. Where the Siong family's grief is genuine and deserves respect, emotions alone cannot serve as evidence in a criminal case. A verdict should be based on credible facts and evidence presented in court, not solely on sympathy for the victims. Another example is Paco remains in prison in Spain. Although there have been petitions for clemency or early release due to time served and questions surrounding the fairness of his trial. If someone argues that Paco should be released simply because he has already spent many years in prison, that is ad misericordiam. The focus shifts from legal evidence and judicial standards to sympathy for his situation. Next is contradictory premises. The two statements are, Paco was in Manila, over 600 kilometers away from Cebu at the time of the crime, and the prosecution claimed Paco led the abduction in Cebu. These are contradictory because both claims cannot be true at the same time unless the additional evidence explains how they can be reconciled. The contradiction highlights the conflict between the prosecution's allegation and the defense alibi, which was one of the central issues in the case. The third fallacy is ad hominem. The statement says, the media portrayed Paco and his co-accused as rich kids abusing power. That is considered an ad hominem because it focuses on the accused's wealth and social status instead of presenting evidence that they committed the crime. Whether someone is rich or poor does not prove guilt. Legal decisions should be based on facts rather than personal characteristics or stereotypes. The fourth fallacy is false analogy. The statement says, the Paco Larrañaga case has since become a symbol of flawed justice system, much like the Central Park 5 case in the United States. This may be considered a false analogy because, although both cases involve claims of wrongful conviction and concerns about the justice system, they do not necessarily share the same facts, evidence, or legal circumstances. Similarities between two cases do not automatically mean they should have the same conclusion. And last, we have hasty generalization. The prosecution's star witness David Ponga Valiente claimed he was part of the group but turned state witness in exchange for immunity. His testimony became the central basis for the conviction. This can be an example of hasty generalization if the conviction relied primarily on one witness's testimony, especially when other evidence, such as the defense's alibi, was disputed. Drawing a conclusion from limited or contested evidence can lead to an incomplete or premature judgment. And for biases, the first bias is availability heuristic bias. This incident became known as the Siong sisters case, a crime that gripped the nation due to its brutality. This is an example of availability heuristic bias because the crime received extensive media coverage and became one of the most memorable criminal cases in the Philippines. Since the case was so widely publicized, people may have judged and accused based on the vivid and emotional information they remembered rather than carefully examining all the evidence presented in court. The second bias is the bandwagon effect. The media portrayed Paco and his co-accused as rich kids abusing power, influencing public opinion. This demonstrates the bandwagon effect because as more people believe the accused were guilty, others may have accepted the same belief simply because it became the popular opinion. Instead of independently evaluating the facts, some individuals may have followed what the majority believed. The third bias is choice supportive bias. The statement says, the Siong family has always maintained that justice was served. They continue to believe that Paco and his co-accused were guilty. This may reflect choice supportive bias because after accepting the court's decision, the family may continue believing that the verdict was correct and interpret later information in ways that support that belief. This does not diminish their loss, but it shows how people naturally tend to defend decisions they have already accepted. The fourth bias is anchoring bias. The prosecution's star witness David Ponga claimed he was part of the group. His testimony became the central basis for the conviction. This is an example of anchoring bias because the court or the public may have placed significant weight on the testimony of the state's main witness from the beginning. Once that testimony became the primary focus, it may have been more difficult to objectively evaluate other evidence, including Paco's documented alibi. The fifth bias is outcome bias. The body of Mary Joy was later found at the bottom of a ravine. This may illustrate outcome bias because the tragic outcome of the crime could lead people to believe that the investigation or the verdict must have been correct simply because the consequences were severe. However, the seriousness of a crime should not replace the careful evaluation of evidence when determining guilt. The last bias is confirmation bias. Despite the overwhelming alibi, the trial court dismissed the defense as fabricated. This may be an example of confirmation bias if investigators or the court focused more on evidence supporting guilt while giving less consideration to evidence supporting Paco's alibi. Confirmation bias happens when people give greater importance to information that matches their existing beliefs while discounting information that challenges those beliefs.
The Paco Larrañaga case highlights the importance of justice based on credible evidence, due process, and impartiality rather than public opinion or media influence. The author's argument is convincing because it presents both the prosecution's claims and the concerns about the fairness of the trial, encouraging a balanced evaluation of the evidence. The case also demonstrates how behaviorism, cognitive biases, and logical fallacies can shape public perception, reminding us that critical thinking and fairness are essential in the pursuit of justice.